back, everybody. I'm here for the third installment with Dr. Gabrielle Francis. And Gabrielle Francis is also known as the Urban Alchemist. She has a practice in New York City, and she's a dear friend of mine. And we share a lot of experiences in common. And today, we'll focus our attention on a conversation about healing, where I'll be picking up on some of the themes that she spoke about in the first two segments. So I was listening carefully, and in the first one, you mentioned that during your first trip that was outside of the United States, that you found yourself in Europe, where you went on a number of pilgrimages. And I want to pick up on that theme because that's something that I consider extremely important. And in fact, when I work with my students, for them to move toward the wounded healer archetype. In other words, you sort of talked about this without necessarily using the word, but the idea that each one of us who is involved in a healing practice, whether we're conscious of it or not, we are healing an aspect of ourselves. And I consider two things to be really foundational in one part of what it is to be a healer. A few weeks ago, I was speaking with my students, and we ended up in a conversation about two aspects of being a healer. One is the being of a healer, and the second one is the practices that go along with being a healer. And when it comes to the being of a healer, there are two things that come to my mind, and I'm going to throw this back to you in just a moment, Gabrielle. And those two practices are from the Native American side of my background, the vision quest. And in my case, my adoptive grandfather was Oliver Pattapony, who was the last medicine man of the Comanche people. And his vision quest is what led to him being healed of inoperable cancer and becoming a healer. He eventually put me on my vision quest at the same spot in the Wichita Mountains in Oklahoma. So I consider that to be one foundational practice that leads to a certain type of being in the healer. And second, the pilgrimage that does essentially the same thing, which is to ground in the person a certain healing potentiality or energy that comes from the power of place. How power manifests in certain places more than others, as well as the tradition, the collective energy of that place drawing people in over the course of so much time. So I'm wondering how would you reflect on that based on your experiences at pilgrimage places starting in Europe and then going on to other countries?
Well, I did two vision quests too. Once when I was 18, and that was a group called Vision Quest that kind of emulated the Native American ceremony for Westerners. It was pretty life-changing too. But then I made a real vision quest with a Native American elder and in South Dakota. A whole different level of intensity, as you can imagine. Very life-changing. And all of my trips are pilgrimages. I always feel that I'm on a pilgrimage when I'm traveling. And I'm trying to actually incorporate that into my daily life too. But I think what you're saying about all of this is the vision quest is like a rite of life passage, and that we're really lacking in that in modern day society. And so those kind of transitional rituals, those where the community comes together to move you to another place and you look for an answer from the spirit, the vision quest is so powerful. The pilgrimages, I've done them all around the world of all different religions. And I think there's a power of all of the people who've been on that trail before and their energy of seeking. You can feel that when you're on these roads. You know what I mean? And I think that one of the things that you learn the most when you're on a pilgrimage is that the destination is the least important part, that where the transformation is happening is on the road. And I bring that into my practice because I always tell my patients that your healing is not a destination. You're not going to be with me for 6 months and one day be cured and you're never going to have any health problems. Your entire health journey is part of your pilgrimage, your transformation. And once you get to one destination, something new is going to happen, and each layer is unraveling and unraveling you and taking you closer and closer to your source. So if you've decided to be on a healing path, get used to it. There's going to be challenges that are coming up, and they're all there to bring you deeper to your connection to spirit and deeper to the healing you were meant to experience in this lifetime.
So would you say in your personal experience that you felt this same sense that I described about how pilgrimage and vision quest lead to a change in being?
Definitely. I feel like it's like a release of an old and a rebirth of the new. And it's like the vision quest is more staying in one place and silent receiving, where the pilgrimage is a movement type of receiving in a way. But I feel that there's some kind of clarity in both of those experiences where your mind becomes clear and you get messages from the universe about which direction you're supposed to be going. What is the true message of the healing that you're receiving?
We're on the same page, Gabrielle. Another theme that I wanted to pick up on was the idea of performance. And sometimes when I say that, people, I think, get the wrong impression. And I'm not saying that it is a show for the sake of a show, but there is something in the ritualized enactment of a ceremony that has a beginning, a middle, and an end that parallels the transformational experiences that we have in our own healing journey and in helping other people through their healing journey. Because if I think about the difference between curing and healing, we can say that curing is to eliminate, sometimes it's the cause, sometimes it's the symptoms of an imbalance, whereas healing is this process of coming to wholeness. And they may come together or they may be completely separate. But in so many cases, in my experience, there is a performative aspect to this. And as you know, I'll just briefly go through it the way that I understand it in curanderismo. Because in curanderismo, we begin with plática, with the heart-to-heart talk that first uncovers the layers and layers of meaning, the story that we have in our own life that has underlying causes and underlying things that we want to shift. And once those are identified, we go on to the performative aspect of it, which we call limpia, which you mentioned in passing during our last segment. And in limpia, we use a symbolic performance where there is a shift, where something moves from the inside of the body to the outside of the body. We manipulate symbols that really come from our own unconscious, and something changes. So that's the way that I see it.
So beautifully put, and I love that. You know, the shaman that I apprentice with in the high Andes, the Q'ero people, they believe that one of the biggest ills of modern society is that as people are moving away from their ethnic identities, their families, and their religion, they're losing ritual. And ritual is the way we ground spirituality into our daily life, right? And that's what I think these performative actions are. They're rituals that have symbolic meanings and they bring in archetypal energies. And, you know, they were very much embedded into religious ceremonies of all different types of religions. But as people are becoming less religious, I think they're craving this. And this may be why we're seeing trends of people trying to find it outside, like going to yoga retreats or going to an ayahuasca ceremony, or, you know, they're really looking for that because I think it's human nature is to have ceremonies and rituals to take us from one spiritual place to another spiritual place, whether we're aware of it or not. What do you think, Bob?
I completely agree. And I think the performance of healing is an absolutely beautiful aspect of it.
It's so amazing. And it's one of the things I love about traveling to a lot of these more simple cultures is to see how they prepare for a festival. Like when we go to Oaxaca for Day of the Dead, to see all the energy of the community preparing the ritual of their altar, their ofrenda, to shopping for the herbs, to making the food, to getting the limpias, all of that preparation for this return of the ancestors that's happening together as a culture. It's just a powerful experience to be part of that. And I feel like we're really missing that in modern Western culture.
We absolutely are. And I can't think of a better example of it than Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead. So I will also mention that, Gabrielle, you joined me on one of the tours in Oaxaca, and maybe you could tell the listeners and viewers, what was it like for you to be there with Laurencio, who does the tour with me, and his family, and just, you know, your impressions about it?
Well, I mean, your trip to Day of the Dead is so powerful because it's not just like taking people out for a Mexican Halloween excursion, because that's what a lot of people think Day of the Dead is. It's Mexican Halloween. It's like, oh, no, you don't understand. These people are preparing for the souls of their ancestors to return to Earth. And with Bob's trip, and Laurencio, who is a curandero and a biologist and a teacher of curanderismo as the tour guide, and he brings you into his family, welcomes you as you're part of the family, and you get to see some historical places, but you get to experience El Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead, as if you were on that journey yourself. So you go and you shop for the herbs and you create your own altar with the group, and you get to prepare and see the food traditions and the making of the mole with the family. You get to experience the people welcoming the ancestors in the cemeteries and parading the ancestors to the house and having fun with them in the house and then taking them back home. I mean, and it's the best way to experience Day of the Dead because you're getting to see the curanderismo, the healing preparations for it, and receive a limpia and a temazcal. So by far, this is the best way to experience Day of the Dead. And I hope you continue to do it and do it in other cultures as well, because I think this kind of trip that inspires the cultural plus the spiritual and the local experience of it is so powerful.
Well, if you're watching or listening to this and you want more information about that upcoming experience, which we'll be doing at the end of October, please visit my website, which is www.bobvetter.com, and you'll get all the information about how you can join us in Oaxaca this year for Day of the Dead, or Dia de los Muertos. So I want to go on to one final segment with you, Gabrielle. And you mentioned the word trance in our first session together. And I want to tell a little story about how it is that I came to be interested in trance and its relation with healing. When I was reading about the ghost dance religion, for anybody who's not familiar with it, this was something that began in the 1800s because of a Paiute healer by the name of Wovoka. And Wovoka was living during the time of tremendous cultural change. And Wovoka had a series of visions that pointed him in a particular direction. And out of these dreams and visions came this idea that Native American people should come together from various tribes and perform a new type of ceremony called the ghost dance, which was a type of ground dance. And during this ceremony, the dancers would very often fall down on the ground in trance, and they would travel to another world, a world where they say that they could be reunited with the spirit of their ancestors, reunited with the buffalo that were hunted almost to extinction, and reconnected with a world before the traumas of colonization and westernization. But it was, interestingly enough, it was a segment, it was a brief part of an anthropologist named James Mooney that led me to want to look into trance as an element of healing, because what he said was that Wovoka, during these ceremonies, he would have a person standing in front of him and he would use his eagle feathers. And Mooney said when he observed this, that the person's eyes would follow the feathers, and he said that the person would go into a trance, and that trance was connected to the healing. Now that led to my personal interest in looking at trance and its connection cross-culturally with healing, because we find it in things like the use of entheogens or plant substances to induce altered states of consciousness. As you know, we find it in music. We find it in hypnotic language patterns, whether they are in Western thought, like, for example, Milton Erickson was a master of these hypnotic language patterns that led to a particular type of hypnosis. In ceremonies, we find hypnosis or hypnotic trance induced. And this is, to me, the most fascinating part of the story of healing. And I just want to throw it back to you, Gabrielle, to riff on for a moment.
And I think it's so interesting. So I've had a lot of experiences of it in just different cultures, in the music and dance connection, like especially in the cultures that have the syncretism with the West African cultures. So in the candomblé in Brazil, in the voodoo of Haiti, in the Santeria of Cuba and Puerto Rico, and in the Ganawa music of Morocco, the Czar of Egypt. So these are all where they have the syncretism of the West African with either Islam in North Africa or Catholicism. And the music is creating a trance where the healers are channeling in these spirits or deities, and anybody who is in that world or in that place that needs to be healed by that spirit goes into the trance and is healed. Okay, so they're very powerful trance rituals that are induced by the rhythm of the music and also the connection of all the people together and the dancing. And I've experienced the trance in the Tibetan monks chanting. And, you know, even on these pilgrimages, just in the movement of the groups of people together, and in some of those places where you're moving and praying at the same time. But what I really think is that people are kind of longing for that, because trance means we transcend our natural state. And I think when I was younger, and maybe you were younger, Bob, when we were both young, I think there was this musical element where we would go to see a concert. It's kind of like going to church. You know, everybody's in that experience together. We're completely outside of ourselves. The music is healing us, and we leave feeling like something changed, right?
Communitas.
What?
Communitas.
Yeah.
Name for
And
that.
actually, they have these same experiences. People have these same experiences in their churches, okay?
Yeah.
And especially the churches where there's a lot of the spirit and the dancing and the singing. And I think that we don't have that so much anymore, because music has changed, but also because people are so connected to their phones that they're more documenting experiences rather than experiencing them. And I think people are seeking, you know, drugs as a way to create these transcendent experiences when we could really be getting them in daily life. Would be really great. But I understand that need to trance and transcend so that we can have a cleansing and receive gifts from the spirits and the universe and God and our higher power, whatever it is. We need to create space that's outside of this normal reality.
I agree wholeheartedly. So, Dr. Gabrielle Francis, we have been around the world with you over the course of these 3 sessions. You have a practice in New York City.
Yes.
And people go to your office, but people also meet with you by phone who are outside of the area. Can you tell us a little bit about what you do at the Urban Alchemist?
So the Urban Alchemist, I combine my naturopathic, acupuncture, chiropractic, massage. When people come in, we do a complete intake, and I talk to them about what's their current problem, their entire health history, and what their goals are. And we come up with a plan to kind of move them from where they're at to where they want to be. You know, one of the things that I think is very important as a healer is to be able to really listen to people and accept them unconditionally. And I think that's one of the first steps in healing, is actually seeing somebody, accepting them, and letting them know that you hear them. People are not used to being listened to, and they really crave it. But the other part of it is to create a new possibility for them, because what I find is when people come in and I ask them what their health goals are, they're so much smaller than what's possible. And I feel that what my purpose is to help them see something greater that's possible, and that there's an actual way to get there, and to shift them towards that belief. And I believe that's one of the most powerful things you can do in healing, is helps people to see a different reality than what they thought was possible.
And it's that possibility that is this healing process of coming to wholeness. And I consider you to be not only a doctor in the Western sense, but a true healer. Mm-hmm. And let me say to everybody who is observing this or listening to this, that I feel strongly enough about the work that Dr. Gabrielle Francis does that I sent my own wife to her. My family is a patient of Dr. Francis. So somebody who is considering coming to you, I'm going to recommend that they pick up this book, The Rockstar Remedy, which is, of course, an amazing book. And maybe that'll give them even a better sense of the work that you do, and then
Little
to get to
taste
see
of
you in
it.
person. Yeah, exactly. And then go to see you in person. So,
Mm.
Dr. Gabrielle Francis, thank you so much for being with me for 3 separate segments and for our travels around the world together.
It's always an adventure, and healing is an adventure, whether you can travel outside of the country or not. Just remember that your path in healing, as a person who is desiring to be healed and have change in your life, whether it's body, mind, or spirit, it's always going to be an adventure. And there isn't a destination, so just enjoy the journey.
What a wonderful message to end with. Thank you, Gabrielle. And thank you, everybody, for listening.
Thank you.